It's been said that some of life's most important lessons are learned far beyond the walls of a classroom, as well as from those with more life experience, and that the living have much to learn from those who have passed on. All are factors that infuse a course of study offered at Georgia State University's Honors College, a course that is changing the way students think about their lives, about civil rights, and about the possibilities for making a difference in the world. It is a class that honors the legacy of a man who was a slave, a barber, and an entrepreneur, Atlanta's first black millionaire and founder and president of the Atlanta Life Insurance Company. What few may know is that this man, Alonzo Herndon, as well as his son, Norris, also supported individuals, charities, and organizations like the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that paved the way for the civil rights movement. And that is the lesson of this AIB Presents, the Herndons and Beyond, Legacies of the Civil Rights Movement.
It says, can anyone read it for me?
Alonzo Herndon, Atlanta's first black millionaire, operated an elaborate barbershop at 66 Peachtree.
Karshik Sims-Alvarado was a scholar of the Herndon family.
It was kind of like a middle spa, if you will. Men could get their hair cut here, they could take a bath, and they could even get their tooth pulled as well, too.
Sims-Alvarado teaches the honors course, The Unsung Heroes of the Long Civil Rights Movement.
This younger generation, and what I mean by younger, I think anyone under 40 is not very familiar with the story of the Herndons and the impact that they had on the city and to the United States history in regards to their contribution to business, as well as to their involvement in the long civil rights movement.
The very site of the Honors College where the Herndon course is housed and inspiration for the course. Larry Berman is the dean of the Honors College.
I think it's very important, given our physical location, that our students, who are the future leaders of not only Georgia but the world, immerse themselves in the history and the culture of the African American experience of Auburn Avenue, the building itself, the civil rights movement. And it's unfortunate students can come here for 4 years and never go down Auburn Avenue, never learn about the history, the rich history of the civil rights movement, the pioneers who made this happen. And so when the opportunity for the initiative came along, I, as the dean of the college, thought that this is a no-brainer. I mean, this is just the easiest decision in the world. And then also clearly given the fact that the Atlanta Life building itself was the headquarters of Atlanta Life.
What is central to the course, the students engage in projects that have real-world applications. Sarah Cook is a professor of psychology and associate dean of the Honors College.
One thing they get in this class, one student last year said it was the most intellectually liberating class he'd ever taken, because we say, we're going to give you a foundation, and then we expect you to go out and learn more and come back and teach us and teach the broader community. So it really has become a living initiative in that sense.
That living initiative has also attracted people like Dean Baker, who brings expertise in city planning and historic preservation.
We're all standing on the shoulders of those who came before, whether we know it or not. And with the Herndons, with Auburn Avenue, Atlanta Civil Rights Committee, there's numerous people, too many for me to remember to list. But that is, when we stand on those shoulders, we know the stories, we can either emulate the good things or avoid the pitfalls. And my goal in this is to make these stories able to be told in as many different ways in as many places as possible.
Working together in small groups is also the model for the class. Julie Renner is the graduate research assistant.
Part of this learning process is collaboration, and that is such a huge part of any public history, is working with other people and helping people develop their own sense of identity and history through working through these projects, and also working directly with the community that you want to interpret their story. So we're going to be talking to participants who actually worked in the civil rights movement or actually saw the civil rights movement. They're very much involved in the story, and we want to make sure that we're telling it right for them.
But before interpreting the story of the Herndons and other unsung heroes of the civil rights movement for others, there was just one thing many of the students had in common.
The first day, they were like, Alonzo Herndon, and just, who's that? I didn't really know much about the Herndons. I knew about the Atlanta Life Building because obviously Georgia State moved here, and when I'm giving tours, they give us some background of, the building. But I didn't know that it's one of the top companies. I didn't know all that he did, that Norris did in terms of donating money to the NAACP. I wasn't aware of any of that, and that's so huge that, he was Atlanta's first Black millionaire, how much his company's worth, and then you go in Atlanta and you see Coca-Cola, you know about, all the other people that were so prominent here, but with him it was like you never really heard about him.
Student Brandon McCune had a chance to reflect on the class with civil rights leader Lonnie King, who has been a vocal supporter of the course.
What was it you knew about the Herndon family before you took this class?
Next to nothing. I was not even aware of the name, but I'm grateful for the class and, the new experiences that I have, experienced.
And Lonnie, what did you want Brendan and the others to know about the Herndons?
I wanted them to know that there were two men who had a total commitment to civil and human rights in America, and who for about 100 years almost made major financial and spiritual contributions and in-kind contributions to this movement, and that they did it without fanfare. They did it without having any press releases that they did this, that, and the other. And I think it's important for us to realize that at a time when it was not possible for the NAACP, the Urban League, and organizations like that to have a lot of money to carry forward their programs, the Herndons were there as a stopgap. I also would like for him and others to know that the Herndons also vigorously supported higher education for African Americans, especially in the Atlanta University Center.
Early in the semester, students identify projects that build on that legacy, like creating a database to document the work of civil rights leader C.T. Vivian.
You can click like the Twitter icon and say, oh, I just watched a video about C.T. Vivian in urban schools, or I just watched his interview. Or when you click on the search engine and you want to find something for urban schools, you can say it's an interview or a speech where he mentioned urban schools. You can see all those results pop up, so it can reduce your research time. So that'll help.
We pretty much want to make sure that we can tag all the important information that's in all of the videos, so it's easy to search by topics that people want to search. We want to make sure that we can have it ordered chronologically, so we have information about the date or who did the video, who was involved. For the interviews, I want to have a list of the questions that are asked in each of the videos, so you can look at the questions before you watch the video, so you know what to look for.
Another project focuses on creating a website.
As part of this development of the website, alongside it, I would like to develop a visual identity for the project, as well as an image that serves as a sort of logo for the project, and a consistent visual identity just to use across any projects that use print materials or digital materials.
I work with older people who are doing research, and a lot of my job is teaching people how to use websites. So just making sure it's accessible to everyone and easy to use, including younger people all the way up to older people.
Yet another involves oral history interviews.
A lot of times history is recorded in such a one-directional way, and so we wanted to really take from this a sign of two perspectives, maybe more, so we could get it out there that it's not just the way that history's taught us, that we want to see it from all different aspects.
Students are also planning an exhibit inside the Honors College.
I would be heading the design for the floor plan, and what I'm hoping to do, not sure if it's something that's possible quite yet, but make a computer program that will give more of a 3D visual of where things will be placed on the floor instead of just a PowerPoint. Not exactly sure if I have the technology capabilities quite yet, but gonna hopefully be able to do that.
I encourage it. I like lofty goals.
It could go around the whole second floor. We could start with the Herndons and kind of who they are and why they're important, and then going more into Atlanta life and why that was important. And then we would put different important dates for Atlanta life, like when the company was growing and when they changed presidents and stuff like that. And then probably include just to give people an idea of what's going on during that time. So include different things that were happening in the civil rights movement, and also include Alonzo and Norris's contributions to the civil rights movement.
Other students are developing interpretive signs to be placed in the community.
You're doing the John Wesley Dobbs. We have the Woodruff Park, and me and Krishna will be doing the Ebenezer Church sign. So I'll speak on our behalf because we're doing the Ebenezer sign. There's a lot of information there that we've been just on the surface, really. There's just a lot there. So we kind of honed in on Herndon, both Herndons, or Norris and Alonzo, and CT Vivian. So we want to kind of include their role in the civil rights movement on Auburn Ave and what they brought to the table. I found that in 1963, actually, CT Vivian was appointed to the SCLC, and that kind of brought him to the forefront of the civil rights movement as far as the front line is concerned. Obviously, there's a lot more involved, but it's a start, I guess. And then for the Herndons, one piece of information I found was that they actually used this building throughout the 60s for various meetings and stuff like that for the civil rights movement. So I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know how that's going to tie into the church, but I mean, it's just a start.
Dr. Cook and I were talking about maybe physically going to these sites and talking to the people, just the people sitting around the area. I think 66 Peachtree is where the barbershop is a hookah shop or something. So we could go in and interview these people who are sitting there, tell them about the history a little bit, because the normal Atlantan is not going to know this spot 100 years ago was a really famous barbershop and it set the stage for the civil rights movement. So that's just be something cool to spread knowledge about and get the community more known. So
I actually live on John Wesley Dobbs Avenue, and I just never really knew who he was at all. So finding a lot about him, I know he's involved with getting voting rights for blacks, and want to look into that and see what he did at Dobbs Plaza. Maybe include a little timeline of events that happened or important things that occurred in Dobbs Plaza, and then just stuff I could find about him that I feel would be important to include there.
One student, a classically trained singer from Greece, focused her research on someone who used her voice to break barriers of race on the stage.
My project is focusing on Mattie Wilda Dobbs. The name of my project is The Life, Journey and Beyond. For those that don't know who she was one of the 5 daughters of John Wesley Dobbs. And she's known as the Pathbreaker African-American soprano who excelled in international and domestic operatic scenes, and who paved the way for other African-American sopranos, singers actually, careers internationally, both in US and in Europe. It is interesting that even though that she was an American citizen, she first excelled and appreciated in Europe. And she was the first African-American singer to sing in La Scala, which is one of the most prestigious operatic stages globally, actually.
It is that kind of connection to the subject that the honors course creates, with opportunities to meet civil rights leaders, like Roslyn Pope, who, as part of the Atlanta student movement, penned the Appeal for Human Rights, published in March 1960.
We had to agree to write the manifesto, or they would not. It would have been very hard for us to both stay in school and be in the streets. So we said we would do that, although we weren't so sure that they weren't just trying to stall us,
Thinking back to when she was the age of the students she spoke to, Roslyn Pope explained why she used the words human rights.
What had been threatened was the actual humanity of the people who were being discriminated against. It made you feel less than human, so it was not, I didn't call it human rights, to include a lot of other things that now we talk about as threatening human rights, but it was particular to these Black people in these United States, in Atlanta, Georgia, their humanity was being threatened and undermined, and therefore, if you are treated less than human, that somehow works its way into your being, into your constitution. I'm just not as good as, and I'll never be as good as, and I'll never be able to try on a dress that riches, and because there's something wrong with me. I'm not human. If I were human, I would not be treated in this fashion. So that's why I thought it was important to call it an appeal for human rights, because that's what I felt was at stake, was our humanity.
In some ways, Roslyn Pope herself was an unsung hero of the long civil rights movement, the title of the Georgia State University Honors Course, where she spoke and signed copies of the Appeal for Human Rights that she wrote and then gave to each GSU student. Lonnie King, reflecting on the class with student Brandon McCune, was also one of the young leaders of the movement.
We are transmitting to a young man or a young person the history of civil and human rights in Atlanta and also in the country. And what I'm hoping that we can do is that we can inculcate into him an understanding that justice, freedom, and equality in America, in Atlanta, will not ring unless you ring the bell. And what that means is that you have to be prepared to be the very best that you can, because democracy, freedom, and justice will not operate on cruise control. You've got to make it work. And each person, regardless of race, color, or creed, has to take that baton of freedom and run it as far as they can for the time that they're here.
Brandon, hearing those words, that's a pretty high standard. In what way, perhaps, do you think that this class has prepared you for that moment?
Well, this class has definitely opened my eyes to a lot of the history of Atlanta and the history of the civil rights movement. I know growing up, my parents, they tried to instill into me a lot of Black history because some things aren't taught in schools, so they definitely are big on that. And hopefully I can live up to Lonnie's expectations.
It's a sentiment echoed by other students.
Because it's not just a class, it's going to become a part of a history that could be used anywhere. Anybody searching Google want to find out something about, I don't know, Lonnie King, and they could hear an interview that we do with them or read it, and I just think that's awesome.
And so when I think of civil rights, I think of all the people you never focus on. You just hear about the same few people who've done amazing work, but sometimes you don't learn about the other players and the people behind the scenes who really kind of push for change that we don't remember, and I think that's really sad that all they've done is kind of almost forgotten.
Cities and places have an opportunity to really tell their story, and what makes any place valuable is their history. And I think if people don't know their history, it leads them down a variety of ways where they're either repeating or making the same mistakes, or just forgetting where they came from and why they're here. And I think with Atlanta, everybody knows that Atlanta's progressive and we do different things and we had leadership in the civil rights movement, but nobody really can capture the sense of what it was like to be here in Atlanta in the 60s, and what that was like and how different it was and how dangerous it was if you were a person of color. I think that's the part that really gets quickly forgotten, how different it was than now. And I think it's really easy for us to put ourselves in the place where we are now and say, oh, well, it was like that for MLK or John Wesley Dobbs or whoever that was involved. And it's our job to tell both those stories and the stories of all the other people who are involved who might not have a microphone or stand behind the podium, but contributed in a really significant way.
And for me, that's one of the goals of teaching, is how do we democratize knowledge? How do we make it accessible to the public? And so we kind of use the students as like a prototype as well too. You know, how can they learn in this very organic way? And how can we take the learning outside of the classroom and then make that history available to the public? So, so that's the unconventional part about it. A lot of times within the academy, things stay confined within the four walls. And I always imagine myself taking a sledgehammer and just kind of busting down the walls. That's the rebel in me. And, and making it, take the learning outside of the classroom and kind of bring the public in as well too.
Civil rights and history in general is filled with so many silences where these things are happening and nobody has any idea. And I think it's so important that you shed light on these and kind of bring it forward for people to see and understand and develop newer understandings, I think.
And I'm especially excited about the ripple effects from all of this, the scholarships that are going to come out of this, for the students, the idea that we'll be able to support students in the pursuit of research on human rights. This is very, very significant. This is what we should be doing as an honors college. And the speaker series that will bring in some of the country's foremost speakers and advocates for human rights, to have them, and civil rights, to have them come and expose not only to the students in the class, but the whole university community. So I'm really hoping that what will come out of this is not just a program that will be classes for 25 students, but a whole legacy movement that will become a capstone for the Honors College.
The capstone moment when students present their projects to a wider audience, including one who shares her singing talents to honor a civil rights role model. The Rich Foundation has supported the program with $100,000 over 2 years, allowing for undergraduate scholarships with an assurance that student work will contribute to a digitized tour of civil rights sites in Atlanta. The Herndon Foundation has contributed $20,000 toward the endowment, and the program will also co-sponsor visits to Georgia State University by human rights activists, open to the community.
I am far happier with what has happened in terms of engagement, student engagement. So, as a community psychologist, I'm interested in developing and promoting settings that promote health and well-being. So being in the Honors College is almost like practicing community psychology. It is a place where we can take our top students and really give them an environment where they can grow and thrive to their fullest potential. And I think you see that example in these classes. If we don't have history students, we have finance and marketing and opera or vocal performance and psychology, and they're coming to get something new.
I learn a lot about life and maybe it serves as kind of like a guidepost, if you will, for my own life, is that I look at the lives of many people who came before me, and I look at the ways in which we can live cohesively with one another, and how to try to avoid many of the mistakes of our ancestors. In the Quran, the opening prayer, there's a line that says, show us the path of those you have favored. And so that's one of the things I look at. It's like, allow me to learn the ways and the good ways that people have lived their life, and how can I apply that to my own life today. So when I look at the Herndons, they had such a wonderful life. I would have to say that my life has been greatly influenced by theirs. All the individuals associated with the Herndon home, Alonzo, Adrian, who was the wife of Alonzo Herndon, Jessie Gillespie, who was the second wife, and then the son, Nars. And I think I'm most influenced by Nars Herndon, who's often overlooked as well, too. I think his activism and his leadership is very important. He was extremely humbled, and I think that he he was, I think he felt obligated to do the right thing by his father and his mother, who made this path, who opened this road for him to be who he became. I really admire his leadership, is that he allowed great people to do things and not stand in their way. And in regards to his leadership style, that he was like, okay, what is the end goal? And how can I assist someone in being their dynamic selves within this space? And at the end of the day, what good deed are we leaving behind before we leave this earth? Can we make the world better with the resources and the talents that we have?
And when you listen to the students talk about their own experiences, you can see how the impact it has had on them and how important the lessons that they are deriving from the classes really will continue to impact their lives, because we have to remember that these young people are just at the beginning of their life, and this can be a really defining opportunity for them as they take their next step. And I think most people would agree with the following statement, which is that we need people who can make this world better. We need people who can make our society better. But it has to start, I think, at the community roots level. And I think the Herndon Initiative symbolizes all that is possible for both learning from history to change the future. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Well, I'm honestly humbled. I never thought I would be this close to a civil rights leader. I know I'm going to tell my parents about this, and I'm definitely grateful for what you did, advancing the rights for people like me to, come up and have an opportunity to succeed.
Well, thank you very much for your kind comments. Even though you were not born, we were risking our lives for you, because so long we were denied the opportunity to even participate in fighting for civil and human rights. It was all done by the lawyers. And that was necessary because the enemies of progress for African Americans were immense, they were powerful, and they would kill you if you got out of your place. The answer, in my opinion, is to have young people, black and white, regardless of religions, regardless of races, singing this song that we can be better in America. We are better than that.